This episode of Fearless Rebel Radio is brought to you by You on Fire. You on Fire is the amazing 12-week online group coaching program that I run, where we build up your worth from the ground up so that it's no longer hinging on the way that you look. It's got personalized coaching from me and incredible community support, plus lifetime access. Get details on what's included in this program and sign up to be notified when doors open for the next cycle by going to summerinanen.com/you on fire. I would love to have you in that program and in that group. This is Fearless Rebel Radio, a podcast about body positivity, self-worth, anti-dieting, and feminism. I am your host, Summer Inanen, a professionally trained coach specializing in body image, self-worth, and confidence, and the best-selling author of Body Image Remix. If you're ready to break free of societal standards and stop living behind the number on your scale, then you have come to the right place. Welcome to the show. This is episode 113, and I am interviewing DeAun Nelson and Sarah Thompson, Health at Every Size practitioners, about what factors influence our health, how to stop blaming yourself for not being able to lose weight, and how to advocate for your health at the doctor. You can find all the links and resources mentioned in this episode at summerinanen.com/113. Before we begin, I just have a couple of announcements. First, if you haven't already done so, please take a minute to leave a review for this podcast and subscribe using whatever platform you use to listen to the show. I'm going to give a shout out to Love to Ski Canada. Summer, you and your podcast rock. I love the way you approach interviews with humor, humility, and genuine caring. Thank you for all the amazing work that you do. Thank you so much. It's reviews like this that help others to find the show. And if you leave one, it's pretty much guaranteed that eventually I'll read it for you on the show and give you a shout out. It helps others to find the show and helps to bump the podcast up in the ratings, which obviously I appreciate, but it's more so other people can find this information and we can reach more people than our little body positive bubble. Lastly, don't forget to grab the free 10-day body confidence makeover at summerinanen.com/freebies with 10 steps to take right now to feel better in your body. Today's guests are DeAun Nelson and Sarah Thompson. Dr. DeAun Nelson has her doctorate in naturopathic medicine and currently works at Watershed Wellness, where she practices under the guidelines of Health at Every Size and provides a weight-neutral, patient-centered care approach. She is the host of the Do No Harm podcast, and up until October 2017, Sarah Thompson was the co-creator and co-host of this podcast. So now DeAun is just doing it on her own, and I highly encourage you to check it out. Sarah Thompson is a speaker, writer, consultant, trainer, medical advocate, virtual assistant, certified body trust provider, and wearer of many hats. All of her work is done through an anti-oppression and anti-assimilation lens, because acknowledging the trauma of oppression, all of them and their intersections, is a part of healing. Sarah will complete her peer wellness specialist training in the spring of 2018, which she will combine with her body trust work to help others heal their relationship with food and their body. There's a lot of great stuff in this episode, and I highly encourage you to check out the Do No Harm podcast if you want to know more about health at every size and how to advocate for yourself at the doctor's office. Check it out. Welcome to the show, DeAun and Sarah. I'm happy to have you here today.
We're happy to be here.
Yes, great. Well, let's dig in right away. I'd love for each of you to talk about how you got to where you are and what helped you to realize that health at every size was a thing, and how did that help you in your own process?
Wow. Okay. This is Sarah, and how did I get to here? So I spent a lot of my childhood thinking that my body and what I ate was wrong and that I needed to diet, and I did diet. And I would say that I switched from not that chronic dieting can't necessarily qualify for an eating disorder, but I went from chronic dieting and trying to be healthy and exercise and flipped over into an eating disorder, basically age 16. and spent a lot of my adult life in Overeaters Anonymous after having experience with anorexia and bulimia. And then mostly I stopped and it became mostly binge eating, switching between like restriction, binge eating, and exercise. And so I continued to think that there was something wrong with me. Overeaters Anonymous really doesn't speak about food addiction or compulsive overeating as an eating disorder, which is really mind-boggling. They also added working towards a healthy weight or maintaining a healthy weight to their definition of abstinence, which used to only be refraining from compulsive overeating. And that was when I really started to think that there was like, what am I doing and how can I keep going to this program when I no longer feel like I'm getting anything when I go to a meeting? I often actually felt worse after I left. And it's hard because, you know, a lot of people will say, well, if it doesn't work for you, then you're not working at it hard enough. I worked so hard at it. Like, when I do something, I do it. Like, I am head first. I am in it. Yeah. So when I left OA was about 2.5 years ago, and I decided that I needed to figure out or find a new way to do things. And that was when I started following. It was either 2.5 years ago or within like the last 1.5 years that I started following you on your Facebook group. And I think I somehow found you through Isabel Fox and Duke and started following a bunch of people that were talking about a new way, a different way than I had ever done. And, you know, this whole time, like, I finished my bachelor's degree in health sciences in 2010, I believe. Oh, man. No, 2014. I don't know what I'm thinking. 2014. And so then I came out here to go to school. Here is Portland, Oregon. And that was 2 years ago. And then I was at a naturopathic medical college with a bunch of people that are extremely devoted to health and often in orthorexic manner. Oh, yeah, I would add that into my mix, too. And I ended up actually reading Health at Every Size because it was on our Students Aware bookshelf at school.
Wow.
DeAuns over here, like, silent clapping.
I helped work to get that to happen, to get it in our school. So, yay!
Cool.
Good.
Very cool. And I really liked it, but it was also very, like, oh, my God. It was so completely different from all of the things that I had done and thought. Not necessarily that I hadn't thought that it could be possible, but I definitely, like, I drank the Kool-Aid. I drank the Kool-Aid that there was something inherently wrong with my body because I was fat. And that's a really hard thing to undo. And so even though I had read Health at Every Size, I really didn't want to believe that weight cycling was the reason that I could not keep weight off. And then also, while I was following all of these, you know, body positive people that were like posting really confident pictures of themselves and talking about being anti-dieting, it was really challenging because I wanted what they had and I wanted to be able to do what they did, but just following people was not doing it for me. Like, I couldn't figure out how to do it for myself. And so I ended up on like my last attempt at gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free with the encouragement of an acupuncturist and an ND that I was seeing at the time. And I had a really horrible experience with a massage and ended up really triggered. And that ended my diet, my dairy-free, gluten-free, sugar-free diet. I would call it a diet. And then I did what some people call the fuck it plan, which was like, I just ate whatever I want, whenever I wanted, how much ever I wanted. And that was my goal. You know, it was definitely a coping mechanism that helped me to survive. And then July 2016, I went to a retreat with Be Nourished. It's called their Reclaiming Body Trust Retreat. And that is how I figured out to make everything my own. That was when fat stopped being a stigmatized word when I used it about myself or other people. It was when I stopped binge eating. And I want to say that that isn't a perfect thing. Like, I don't feel like I have to 100% of the time not binge eat to say that I stopped binge eating, because it is not the way that I live my daily life anymore. You know, I was really able to start understanding the direct influence of patriarchy on what we do with our bodies and how we talk about our bodies and how we try to make ourselves smaller and how we try to be perfect and how the project of our bodies becomes our focus of our life for a lot of women. And even if you don't get caught up in the whole dieting trap, it's still a project. Like, we still have this ideal beauty, and like, we're supposed to be perfect at everything and not disrupt and not, you know, rock the boat and like just all the things that we are programmed to believe as women. And so, or femme-identified people. And so that's how I am where I am right now. I then was so blown away by what they taught and how they taught that I took their body trust provider training last fall, which is a in-person 1-week retreat and then a 6-month online training with conference calls. And then after that, we do a 6-week consultation call to talk about cases. And then you can apply to be certified.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like so many aspects of your story are going to resonate with people. And I want to ask you some more questions around those, but I'll let DeAun share a little bit about how you got to where you are.
Okay, I'm DeAun Nelson. I'm a naturopath here in Portland, Oregon. My story doesn't seem as dramatic, but which is probably good. Which is good.
It's okay.
But his story is different.
So I was pretty much always a fat kid, and I thought that I wasn't on many diets as a kid, but going back in some journals that I had recently, I actually was on more diets, I think, than I thought I was. I just was never really good at them, which was probably a good thing. And my parents were always very supportive and, tried to make me have good self-esteem, all that good stuff. The world didn't help that, but they worked on it. But I was actually, I guess, pretty fortunate that I stayed pretty weight stable, like through high school and college and large chunks of my adult life. In college, I lived in Germany for a year, and I lost a bunch of weight. I didn't try to, just kind of, so my body ended up doing. And when I came back to the States, I was like, okay, well, I want to stay this size now. So then I was actively trying to stay that size. And I was still like a big person. Like, I was never small, even by, fat standards. I was still pretty big. Yeah, I was just like doing all these things that were healthy, or quote unquote healthy, trying to stay healthy and stay small. And the weight came back, as it does. And I remember sort of getting back into, like, I was having to wear some larger sizes and going back to where it started. And I remember being really upset about it, and then thinking that I was never going to diet anymore. I was going to just try to be healthy and not worry about it. And it was just like this random little thought. But I think it kind of stuck with me. And so over the next 15 years or so, I probably, I did different things where I would try to be healthier, and it was always around healthier. And when I look back, sometimes it might have been on the orthorexic side, but again, I never had the commitment to go fully that way. But I would try to do things that I thought were healthy. At one point, I did become a vegetarian, but that was part of a whole other life change. And so I actually did feel a lot better. And I don't know that it was just the diet, I think, or just what I was eating. It was a lot of things at that time in my life. Eventually, there's a lot of stuff, but I ended up moving here to go to naturopathic medical school, and at the same school that Sarah is going to now. I definitely, jumped in and I got into the whole, cleansing and elimination diets and all of that sort of thing, because that is the culture that the school has. But I always really wanted to work with fat patients, and I really just had this feeling like, people don't have to lose weight. And because I was fat, and I had always been fat, and I'd always been pretty healthy and active, and I knew plenty of people who were that way as well. And so I feel like I already had this idea of health at every size, but I didn't know it was a thing. And then my third year, I was taking a business class, and we were supposed to describe like our perfect clinic or ideal clinic. And I essentially described a health at every size practice. And so my teacher, when he wrote it back, or when he gave it back, he had written a note and asked if I had read this book, Health at Every Size. So I thought, well, no, I haven't, but that sounds intriguing. And I bought it and read it over spring break that year. And it's just like, finally, oh my gosh, yes, this is exactly what I've been thinking. And wow, this was written in 1998. I can't, this has been in the world for so long, and I had no clue about it. And it was really amazing. And for a while, it was just kind of all I had was just like this book. And I'm sure there were a lot of people in my school who got very frustrated with me because I became a little bit evangelical about it. But I really appreciated it too, in that it made me really reconsider a lot of the information I was getting, like about risk factors and causes and even correlations, and not just about fatness, but about other things that are affected by stigma. So I would wonder, well, here's all this information about maybe fatness isn't the cause of all these diseases. Well, certainly somebody's skin color can't be the cause of diseases. And it just really expanded from there. Mm-hmm. And so I questioned a lot before I read the book too, but it became more imperative to me. And then I don't think I really found like the fat community. I found Be Nourished in school because they did come to talk to our school, which was very exciting. And, I tried to bring in people as I could in the last 2 years that I was there, and trying to get Health at Every Size into our bookstore, which was very exciting when we managed that. And just getting people to read it was a challenge. It still kind of is, I think. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I feel like I had like Be Nourished and Health at Every Size. And then probably only in the last couple of years have I really kind of had the push and the energy to really start figuring out, how big this community is, which is amazing to realize how big it is and how it's not as big as I want it to be, but it's so much bigger than I thought it was when I first found that book.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's pretty incredible. So yeah, and then the big push in our podcast to talk about all of this to medical professionals, and like that has become sort of my driving force. Like, I think it's great to talk to everybody in the world about it, of course, but there needs to be such emphasis put on teaching the people that are healing us to not treat us differently because of our bodies or our body sizes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's becoming a passion. Well, it is a passion.
Yeah, it has to happen at the system level, because it's just, otherwise nothing's going to change. So I love that your podcast is, geared towards other professionals, because I think that that's a real gap in terms of what's out there. A lot of it's geared towards the individual.
Yeah, which is great and necessary. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we need to also get everybody on board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that, Sarah, you said that you said Health at Every Size was so different from everything that you had learned and what you thought was possible. So mm-hmm. I'm curious, and I'm sure that, DeAun, you probably felt the same way, at least at some point in time. It's a huge, it's a huge paradigm shift, and that, the idea that weight and health are so intertwined is entrenched in our brains. So I'm curious to know what things helped you fully believe. So get to the point from just sort of being knocked over and like, I don't believe this is, or I don't know whether I want to believe this, or is this actually true, to really believing it. Like, what helped you? Because I think that a lot of people struggle to just, fully embrace and believe that.
Yeah, I think part of it was having teachers/leaders, in reference to like Hillary and Dana, who are the co-founders of Be Nourished and who did the retreat that I did, having them demonstrate and wholeheartedly believe and model what they believe is huge. And then from there, I'm healthy. Like every time I would get blood work done, to see if there was something wrong with my body, there was nothing wrong. Like the most wrong thing was like I had a lower level of vitamin D or something. And like, who doesn't?
Especially in the Pacific Northwest. Yes.
I'm finally above normal. Lots of supplementation.
And I also did at the time have plantar fasciitis, which, side note, I went to a doctor like 4 months ago. I like suffered with plantar fasciitis for over a year because I was so afraid to go. It wasn't even conscious. Like, I didn't want to go to a doctor about my foot. And I finally went because after doing acupuncture every week for a year, it didn't help. And I was like, okay, finally, I'll go. They didn't say a single thing about my weight. Mm-hmm. And like, basically every time I talked about it, I would say half of the people that I talked to about it said they had the same thing. They were thin and the other half weren't. And so it was like, well, if we both get it, then it can't be just because I'm fat.
It's our footwear. Just saying.
Yes.
Yes.
It really is.
It really is the footwear. And lack of blood flow, like, and but that also has to do with the footwear. But yeah, so side note, and that has nothing to do with our weight. And so I think it was just like analyzing things for myself and really coming to terms with like, my health is fine.
Yeah.
And really just getting used to that and believing that. And yeah.
Can I say something?
Sure.
I just want to say, even if your health is not fine, it is not your weight.
Right.
So just...
It's true.
Yeah.
It is a very good point.
There's a lot of things that you can do that will support you and move you toward health if that's what you choose to do, that have nothing to do with losing weight or changing your weight in any way.
So I'd love
That's true.
Yeah, I'd love to kind of expand on that. So, I mean, do you collectively or individually even have a definition of health?
Question, isn't it?
I don't. A long time ago, I think I've read the World Health Organization's definition of health, and I remember liking it, but it's been a really long time since I've read it.
You gonna look it up?
I am.
Yeah,
Do you have a definition of health?
I don't either, because I have seen so many people. When I think of health, I don't just think of physical health. I include mental health, spiritual health, emotional health. And so, I have seen people that are in great physical health, but are having, significant mental health issues or significant spiritual issues or, feeling disconnected. And so I wouldn't consider them completely healthy. And I have seen people who, are in very poor physical health, but, have like great relationships and emotional stability and spiritual stability and mental stability that, but there also wouldn't be considered in completely good health. And honestly, I don't think any of us are ever, like, there may be one point in our entire lives where everything is just perfect for maybe a second. But in reality, I think most of us are always in flux, and, some parts of our health are better and some are worse, and so it's such an intangible thing, and everybody's versions of health, I think, are different. So what I would consider healthiest for me, might not be what's considered healthiest, for you, Summer, for you, Sarah, or for you, audience. And so, there are, like physically there are averages and things that, we're not, like, if you're in these ranges, you're doing okay. And, you're not going to die anytime soon unless you get hit by a bus. But even then, some people fall out of those ranges, but physiologically for them, it's okay. Or some people are in the ranges, but physiologically for them, it's not okay. So it's really hard. And I think even the World Health Organization with their...
I looked it up and I don't like their definition. I take it back.
But I think that I seem to remember them reading something about how it took a really long time even for them to come up with that good definition. So, it's just... It's a complicated...
It really is. It's a complicated
question a lot.
Or complicated answer. And the thing that's kind of coming to my mind right now is that, like, I have kind of given up health as a thing. And my focus really these days is on healing.
I like it.
And there's a huge difference between the two. And we approach the two very differently. And
yeah, talk to me about that.
Yeah, I feel like health has become this gold standard of like, you're a terrible person if you're not seeking health.
Yes.
And and then like the definition of what people are considering healthy is like, well, don't stand too much. Or no, I said that backwards. Don't sit too much, and
it's probably don't stand too much too. Like there's because nothing we do is right. So
in Chinese medicine, there is such a thing as overstanding, and yeah, so it's like it becomes this like all of our food has to be organic, it has to be local. Like, oh my God, you eat processed sugar, like that apparently doesn't go with health. And, you know, I think part of this is our culture, and part of this is that I have been like steeped in the culture of medical education for the past 2 years. So I feel like I'm surrounded by it on a daily basis. But yeah, and so we focus on like, well, if our patients aren't listening to us, then they're being unhealthy or they're being non-compliant. And non-compliant is one of my like least favorite phrases ever.
Me too.
And so I kind of tend to like move away from HAES, even though I think it's a great starting point and I think it's so much better than what our current system is. But yeah, that like going towards healing and working on healing is, I feel like it's so much more inclusive. Again, I want to say that like if your goal isn't healing, then like that's totally fine. And I don't judge that at all, because we're all on our paths and we all only have capacity for what we have at that moment. Mm-hmm. And so healing to me is about like what nourishes you and what helps you to feel the best in your life. And that includes like all of the things that DeAun was mentioning earlier, like spiritual, mental, physical, emotional, all the different aspects of us. And we, and as a society, tend to put this huge focus on physical health, no matter how that affects our mental or emotional health, or even our spiritual health. You know, I have been on a diet through my church. Like, that is for real.
Wow.
And I'm not the only person that experiences that. Like, there is a lot of talk around, like, I have to treat my body because, you know, it's a vessel for fill in the blank, whatever religion, and I need to treat it better. And somehow being fat has become equated to like treating your body badly. And I don't buy that anymore at all, because we don't have long-term control over our weight. It's not sustainable. It's not realistic. And we can do things to change it. I can't deny that. We can change our bodies, but it's often, and I would venture to say never, sustainable and long-term.
Yeah. Which is...
And we don't... Sorry.
No, you go.
We don't really even have a lot of control over our health either.
Right.
Ultimately. I mean, we have some control and, you know, doing things that are, you know, make you feel good and make your body feel good and nourish your body, all that kind of thing. Like, those certainly help. But, you know, we can't control everything. Mm-hmm. We can only control a very, very small portion. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think that's important to realize. And I would say that part of, for me, health is, you know, doing things that make you feel the best in your body. All your body is your spiritual body, your mental body, like all of the physical, everything. And sometimes, you know, you can pull that off and it's great. And sometimes you can't, but I feel like that's something to strive for, at least.
Yeah, I love the way that you approach it. And Sarah, I loved how you prioritize healing over health, because I think that we focus so much on an outcome versus, you know, just what do I need today for myself, for my mind, my body, my spirit? And I was having this conversation yesterday with a client, and I was saying the greatest thing I did for my health was just start to relax more, like relax around food, relax with my job, relax, set boundaries so that I had more time to relax. And it's just like, it's amazing how, it had nothing to do with cutting out food or, moving. It was about just chilling out, like decreasing the stress load overall. And that was probably one of the best things that's kind of how I approach my own health, is just relax.
I have said this before, but I think it bears repeating, that I think it's really funny that we get so stressed out about health when actually being stressed out, especially constantly stressed out, is actually worse for our health.
That's true.
Yeah.
So you're freaking out about everything all the time, or you're, exercising too much, or you're causing more stress to your body, more inflammation, which is what you're trying to avoid. Then what are you doing? Nothing. Yeah. You're not helping yourself at all. So you're the way you look at it seems perfect. Just relax about it.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Relax. Take the Hawaii approach. Just slow down. This isn't the mainland,
And our physical bodies are actually very resilient, as are, I think, our mental, emotional, everything. Like, people are really resilient, even if you don't feel like you are. You actually are probably way more resilient than you think you are. So that's something to remember too.
This episode of Fearless Rebel Radio is sponsored by theyve.com. You can make this Valentine's Day, and every day for that matter, one that you won't forget with this awesome offer from theyve.com. Through Valentine's Day, you will receive 50% off just about any item. Just go to theyve.com and you'll find thousands of adult entertainment products, including toys, lingerie, and a seemingly endless selection of adult DVDs. And there's more. With every order, you will receive a free romance kit. That romance kit includes a toy for him, a special massager for her, and a little something for both of you, or just for yourself. Why not? Plus, you'll get a free adult DVD to put you in the mood. And that's not all. They are also throwing in free shipping. So check out theyve.com for this special offer. Get 50% off one item, a free romance kit, and free shipping when you enter promo code FEARLESS at checkout. That's FEARLESS, FEARLESS at checkout. Go to theyve.com to do that today. So, something that you mentioned just now was talking about how long-term, diets fail. And Sarah, something you said earlier when you were talking about your story was you felt, or what you learned in OA, I guess, was that if it doesn't work, you're not working hard enough. And so I think intellectually, a lot of people know diets fail 95% of the time.
Yeah.
But there's still, I know a lot of people listening still blame themselves for not being able to, quote unquote, make it work. So, what advice do you have for people who feel like they've failed or who blame themselves? How were you able to, I guess, take your own power back and realize, like, this is not my fault?
So it's funny that that's how you ended your question, because that is one of the things that you, like, I think maybe some of my friends get tired of hearing me say it, but one of the biggest lessons that I took from my retreat with Be Nourished was that it's not my fault. And literally basically having it explained to me about why it wasn't my fault, and really letting myself believe that. And then that leaves you room to be so angry because I spent so much of my life believing it was my fault. And like, it's just maddening how much work and energy we spend on something that is not our fault, and like trying to fix something that is not our fault. And like, and so then, there's the anger, which is great because then you can stop turning it on yourself. But then there's a lot of grief. There's a lot of sadness about that, like spending so many years. And that could be like, some people find this stuff when in their 20s and like it's only been 5 years. Or like me, it was, I don't know, I probably started my first diet when I was 9 or 10 and I quit like at 34, 33. And then, I listened to a woman speak the other day who her dieting history was 35 years. Like, there's so much sadness and so much to be angry about that, like, how we're trained to believe that we can control our bodies. So it's really powerful to be told that it's not your fault and to really understand the how and why it isn't, which is, weight cycling and body diversity. Like, nobody, like, so many people don't just recognize bodies are diverse. And there's always going to be short people. There's always going to be tall people. There's always going to be middle height people. There's like, and it's the same for bodies. Like, we have thinner bodies that like this, and I don't want this to come across as like a horrible thing, because I don't view this as a horrible thing, but like, I literally have a friend who is very tall, very thin, and no matter how much she eats, she is always that same body type, like always. And then there's, like people that are thinner and don't appear fat, and like there's people up to like my and DeAun size and larger. And I kind of want to say numbers because I think that it's not. I don't feel like clothing sizes are a triggering thing, but I think it's also helpful because in pictures you can't always tell what size someone is. And so I wear like a 26, 28, 4X bottom and probably like a 3X top. And yeah, so it's like, let's all just relax about body diversity. Let's all just appreciate how different everyone is. And stop blaming people that their size is their fault.
Yes.
It's not.
Or their size is their victory.
Right? Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's so, I mean, it's like we accept heights, like you said, skin, the people are different. Like we're not golden retrievers. I always kind of use that as a reference. Like we're
all different kinds of dogs.
There's Chihuahuas and there's Great Danes and there's St. Bernards, like, and we don't ever. I remember I babysit and often I figured out that like 5 to 6 is the range where like kids are going to ask questions about why you're so fat. And depending on the day, it can be really bothersome. But I was reading a book to some kids that I was babysitting at their bedtime, and it was about different dogs. And literally, like, I had that question about my size that day. And so, like, when I read the story to them, I was like, look, we don't, like, all these different dogs are all different sizes, just like people are. And yeah. So true. So I want to get to one more thing before we go, and that is just, I know the main focus of Do No Harm is for helping, health professionals, but for an individual who is, in a larger body or perhaps has a history of chronic dieting or disordered eating. I've heard so many stories from community members who are either scared to go to the doctor or they're discriminated against at the doctor. And so, they're not getting the proper care that they need. So I am curious to know what advice you have for people when they're going to see a medical professional in terms of, what can they arm themselves with? What things should they kind of plan or prepare for? How can they find a good professional? What's your advice? I would say that if you have the chance to look online and find the websites that have recommendations for people that are health at every size, or recommendations in Facebook groups from people in your area, because those And they aren't going to exist in everywhere. I acknowledge that's hard. But depending on where you live, you may be able to find a recommendation for someone. Granted, not everybody's also going to be then in your insurance. So if you aren't able to know ahead of time that the person that you're going to go see is at least somewhat on the same page as what you would hope for, I would recommend things like when you get to the waiting room and you fill out paperwork, or when you talk to somebody, tell them that you don't want to be weighed, because often that's the first thing that happens when you go to a doctor is that you get weighed. And for a lot of people, that is super triggering, and you can refuse.
Yep.
You can refuse to be weighed, and they will put that in your chart. And
you can technically refuse anything.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Just saying.
Right. Yeah.
Probably don't need to refuse all of it, but
right.
you could.
And then I would also say that if you don't want food recommendations, if you don't want diet recommendations, I would, if you're able to tell that to the MA, or like have the receptionist put that at the top of your paperwork. So when the doctor or whoever sees your paperwork can see that note that has been noted. And so you don't have to be weighed. You can also tell them that you don't want any weight loss advice and you don't want diet recommendations. And then if the person is being really persistent and not listening to a thing that you're saying, the one question that we often talk about is, okay, well, what would you tell a thin patient?
Mm-hmm.
And how would you treat a thin patient? Because for someone like you, there are so many stories out there of people that have gone to the doctor for asthma, a sore throat, literally broken leg, mm-hmm. and they've been told to lose weight.
Yeah.
And like that person that broke a leg, it's an article that I have read online that the person was told that they couldn't treat their broken leg until, well, they didn't know that it was broken because they didn't do x-rays because she was fat.
Wow.
So she then went to another doctor when the person said that they weren't going to treat her because she needed to lose weight before he could treat her. She then went to another doctor and found out that her leg was broken and then got treated for a broken leg. So being able to put a kink in the person that's treating you about what they would do if you were a thin person is a way to disrupt that cycle.
Don't let them get lazy.
Yes.
I mean, it's lazy medicine just to tell people to lose weight. So don't let them get lazy. You know, they need to practice too, right?
Yeah.
That's true. I also want to say that just acknowledge that it's horrible that this is what we have to do. Mm-hmm. Healthcare should be better. I'm sorry that this is what we have to deal with. I'm sorry that you have to advocate for yourself when you're vulnerable. And I'm sorry that you don't feel safe seeking healthcare.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I agree with all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because then the impact of those events is it's detrimental to one's health. It's like...
Yeah, absolutely.
Not getting the proper physical care, and then also the impact of that type of a situation on a person's mental well-being and mental health and long-term health. If then they do think, well, I must have to lose weight or I must have to diet, and just furthering along any, damage that's being done.
And honestly, listening to your podcast, even if you're not a medical professional, listening to our podcast can give you a lot mm-hmm. of fuel to walk in and say, actually,
yeah,
this is what I need. And to be able to better advocate for yourself because you have more information. And I think Reagan Chastain has, or danceswithfat.com has a card. I'm not sure where it is, though, online, that you can basically take with you mm-hmm. that will say pretty much everything that Sarah mm-hmm. said, but you don't have to say it. You just hand them the card. Mm-hmm. You can always call in beforehand and, mm-hmm. Send over that information, just saying, this is what I need as a patient. You can call and ask if the doctor, even if you don't know for sure, you can call and say, hey, does the doctor know anything about this? Those are really great ways to take care of it sort of before you get there. so that, they're aware of it. And then if you can take somebody with you, it's always great to have somebody with you, because especially if you feel really crappy, you may not remember, even if the doctor's not worried about your weight, you may not remember everything that happens because you don't feel very good. So if you can, I recommend you take somebody with you. They can also be there, even if they don't say a word, as a witness. And so when you leave later, if something egregious has happened, they can say, wow, no, that was not appropriate, right? And that kind of gives you okay, it wasn't just me. Or, you start thinking, oh, well, maybe the doctor's right. And your friend or your partner or whoever can say, no, they're not. Mm-hmm. So, and of course, your advocate has to be on your side.
Right.
Don't bring somebody who's going to agree with the doctor that you need to lose weight for your broken leg.
Yes.
But that can be helpful if you have somebody that you don't mind, hearing your personal medical information. So, yeah.
Those are all really good suggestions. So let's talk a little bit about your podcast. Tell everyone maybe some of the topics that you've covered, because I think that there's really good information in it for individuals as well. So not just for medical professionals, but really helpful for individuals, because we need to know this stuff too.
Absolutely. Yeah. The goal, the focus of our audience is the medical professionals, because they need to know this information, but it's absolutely
for everyone.
Very useful for everyone. Yeah. So we do not discourage people from listening just because it just might be a little more technical sometimes. So that's cool, though.
Yeah. So talk about it. What are some of the topics that you've covered? What's it about?
Our first episode, we talked about, oh yeah, we did. We talked about who we are and probably a few different details than what we talked about today. And then our second episode was, should there be a war on obesity?
Hint, no.
Spoiler alert. And we go into a lot of details about the how and why and how it's not effective and how it's not helping anything. And then our next episode goes into weight stigma, and we talk about how people are viewed differently because of their weight. And we talk about the myths that go along with being a person at a higher weight. And then the next episode is about weight bias, and we talk about
specifically weight bias in medical care.
It was a rough episode. It's really good, but it's a really hard reality to know how much literature is out there on how poorly medical professionals of all types, nurses, med students, I'm sure dietitians, eating disorder professionals, how poorly people think of people that are, air quotes, obese. Mm-hmm. And there's research that shows that legitimately supports that we do get poorer health care. And
yeah,
it's a lot.
It's a lot. I think we've probably gotten the most response from it, from people we know and some people we don't know. And that's been interesting because it was really the hardest episode we've done so far. We've only done 4. Yeah. So if it's the hardest episode we ever do, that'd be great. I don't think it will be.
We'll see.
And then we're going to do...
Our next one is healthism.
Yeah, which is excited about.
And we'll include nutritionism. They probably could be separate episodes, but it stems from the same idea, really.
Yeah. Awesome.
And then we have our first probably 7 or 8 episodes are sort of an arc leading us from, the whole obesity crisis, quote unquote, all the way to health at every size ideas. Well, now fat acceptance. So
body trust,
all of these different ways of, I don't even know what to say about to kind of breaking down the myths that being fat is a bad thing necessarily, and that we need to change people's bodies. So all of those groups that are saying, no, actually, it's okay. And we can be who we are and it'll be okay. So we're kind of, the whole arc is leading to that. So you guys have a little something to look forward to. And then after that, we'll talk more. We'll have different episodes, hopefully at some point interviews.
Our list of ideas is really long.
Yeah, it just gets longer too because people
That's good.
Oh, what about this? And we're like, we'll add it to our list.
Right.
That's good.
there's how can we make sure that there's equipment for all body sizes? There's PCOS, diabetes, like sleep apnea. There's like how nobody talks about how dieting leads to gallstones, and like, you know, tons of people have their gallbladder removed and think it's because they eat poorly or because they're fat. And yeah, there's all sorts of things.
Yeah, tons of things. And then we've just been starting a list of people to interview when we get to that point. And it is also growing very rapidly. So there's a lot of information, and yeah, I'm excited.
I'm excited too. Yeah, those topics are so needed. So obviously.
Which they weren't, honestly. But
yes.
But I'm glad that we can talk about them.
Yes. Well, I think being able to digest it in the format of a podcast can be extremely helpful too. So tell everyone where they can find it.
iTunes, Google Play Music, and our website, which is www.donoharmpodcast.org.
Okay.
And we're also on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter.
Do No Harm Podcast.
Okay, great. Awesome. Well, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing your experiences and your stories and talking about what you're up to, because I feel like we could have talked about all of those topics, but I'm going to direct everyone to listen to your podcast for them, because it is really good. I was listening to it leading up to this, and there's just so much good information in there. So you've done a really good job, and it filled an important need.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Rock on.
It's been great.
Yeah.
We recorded this podcast several months ago, obviously when Sarah and DeAun were still co-hosting the podcast together, so things have changed since then. You're going to find links in the show notes about how to follow DeAun and Sarah specifically. Sarah's handle is amazingly resilient fat goddess, which is awesome. The show notes are at summerinnanen.com/113. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you next time. Rock on. I'm Summer Innanen, and I want to thank you for listening today. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Summer Innanen. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this show. I would be so grateful. Until next time, rock on.